Thank you very much. Good afternoon, members. 4 briefings have been scheduled for today's meeting of the Committee of OFMDFM. The Department will discuss progress on the Programme for Government Commitments. Relevant documents were received yesterday evening. They're on page 6 and beyond on your tabled pack. The Department, again, on their consultation on draft good relations indicators. And the Assembly Research and Information Service will talk to us about refugee issues ahead of the debate that we're bringing forward in the Chamber on Monday. And finally, in closed session, back to our draft bill for the Northern Ireland Public Service Ombudsman and the Part 3 clauses that we put off from last week. I understand we have an apology from Brenda Hale, who may arrive late, and the same, I think, applies to Jimmy Spratt. The DRD committee, I think we're working through lunch. Any other indications? Thank you. Okay, to item 2, Chairperson's business. Page 5, you'll see a copy of the committee's current invitations. Just in, members, at 1:13 today. Thank you for your correspondence of 5th of June. Inviting us, the First Minister and Deputy First Minister, to attend committee on 11th or 18th of June. Regrettably, we are unable to attend on the proposed dates. However, we would be available to attend on Wednesday, the 25th of June, which I think, Clark, is the penultimate session of term. So I assume we will bank that and look forward to a session with OFMDFM. Okay, thank you. The other thing, members, we'll come to that actually in matters arising. So, draft minutes, item 3. Are you content to agree the draft minutes of our meeting of the 4th of June, which begin at page 7? Thank you. Matters arising then, the Human Rights Commission briefed us at the end of May in relation to the proposed cut in their annual budget for 2015-16. We then wrote to all the Assembly committees highlighting its concern at the proposed cut, including the potential impact it could have on the Commission's ability to carry out its statutory functions. So far we've received responses from the Committee for Employment and Learning and also Finance and Personnel. On page 13 you'll see the response from the Committee for Employment and Learning. They're suggesting that we write to the Northern Ireland office and ask for their opinion on whether it has assessed the impact of the proposed cuts on the Commission. Meanwhile, the Committee for Finance and Personnel at page 15 are highlighting that it has on a variety of occasions sought expert opinion from the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission on a range of legislative proposals, and it considers it's important that there's no diminution in the capacity of the Commission to support the Assembly and its committees in this way. So the Committee for Finance and Personnel seeks assurances in this regard and suggests the issues drawn to the attention of the Northern Ireland Select Affairs Committee. So there are 2 proposals, NIO and the Select Affairs Committee. The other thing, members, which I'm sure I'm not the only one to have noticed, is that the Human Rights Commission seem to have launched an initiative to look at accident and emergency provision. Now, without making any comment on that proposal and whether it's a good or a bad thing to do, it's beyond their statutory duties. So it just, when I heard about it, I thought it is strange that on one hand they're complaining they don't have enough resource to carry out their statutory duties, while on the other hand they're announcing a new initiative.
I think it's a cunning plan to attract your attention, Chair.
Well, it worked.
I don't think there is tension. I think what they were saying was not that they couldn't fulfil any of their statutory duties. It was that they couldn't fulfil in full their statutory duties. And therefore I would expect them to be undertaking inquiries or reviews on an ongoing basis. But in the absence of proper funding was not to the scale that they would like to do.
Well, they made clear that we're having to make choices.
Absolutely no choices. They can't choose to do everything, they can choose to do something.
Well, I'm not clear, maybe you are, but I'm not clear whether this impacts on their ability to carry out their statutory functions.
They can't fulfil their statutory functions. I don't think they said they couldn't do. They didn't say they couldn't do anything. They were indicating that they couldn't do all that they would like to do.
Right.
And that in that way they would be failing in their statutory duties.
Yeah. But if
It doesn't mean that they fail in every way, in every statutory duty.
No, I'm not suggesting that. But if they open this inquiry into accident and emergency, it will require resource. And what are the implications of that resource for fulfilling all their statutory duties? Surely there has to be an implication.
Yeah. They won't be able to do some other things, but they told us that.
Well, they didn't tell us they were bringing on this own initiative inquiry. I would suppose we write to them and ask what implication it would have on their resources.
Yeah, agreed. As long as it's put in a neutral way, not in a challenging way. I wouldn't be content with us saying to the Human Rights Commission or the Equality Commission or any other commission, why are you doing this when you don't have the resources? That's not the way it should be asked.
I didn't say I was going to ask it that way. I just said I was surprised to discover, having heard them say, we are now at a point where we're having to make decisions, we're in danger of not fulfilling all our statutory duties, then to hear them say in another arena that they're opening up an inquiry. I'm more than happy to ask in a neutral way, can you tell us about this investigation you intend to conduct into the health service and what implications it has?
Chair, I would be uncomfortable with that because I think there's a broader concern here where their budget has been cut and we need to stay focused on that particular issue. No matter what happens out there, we have to come at this from a human rights perspective in every issue. And this is something that probably was pre-planned and the budget impact hasn't actually happened yet, but I would be uncomfortable with that kind of letter because we need to stay focused on the broader issue of the fact that their funding is being cut. And regarding the two proposals that have come forward, I would be suggesting that we run with them in terms of writing off to the NIO and the Select Committee.
Sorry, but you were saying you were assuming?
Chair, I'm not assuming anything. I just want to stay focused on the real issue here, and that's the fact that their budget is getting cut. I'm not going to, go into what they're looking at or what they're not looking at. I think we need to stay focused on the broader issue that their budget is being cut, and that's what I'd like to stay focused on, as opposed to delving into, why they're doing this and why they're not doing it.
Well, I'm still proposing we write.
Sure, I'm content to second that proposal. I would be concerned that they're going to stretch themselves too thin here in a limited budget. I want an assurance that if they take on this piece of work, that they're happy that they have the resources to carry it through.
It's not our job to micromanage the Commission.
No, it's not.
Certainly our job to say, could you tell us what your programme for work might be? I'm sure actually they'd welcome that the committee would be asking genuine questions, but we're not going to micromanage what they do or do not do. And if they made a decision to do this, they must think they've got the resources to do it. So I'm content with what they're doing and why they're doing it, and that they got the resources to do it. You may want to ask what the scale of it is and any other comments they might want to make about resource issues. But it's not for us to say, do you have the resources to do this? That's not our job.
No, but if we are going to, as it were, campaign on their behalf, I think we need to be fully apprised of the issues. So you content or not content? Do you want to push this?
I don't really see, the relevance of it. I think we need to stick with the broader issue of the fact that their funding is getting cut. And I know that there's serious public concerns out there about A&E, and I don't believe that we're in a position to be asking questions around that. They're doing obviously a good job that the public there want. But I still think we should go back to the two.
Human Rights Commission are doing a good job.
I still think we should go back to the two proposals and discuss those as opposed to what they're doing with A&E.
Okay, well, do you want to... We've had a proposal and a seconder. And should we put this to a vote?
Aye.
Like, what is the questions you're asking? Is it the questions that Mr. Moutry once asked, which I do oppose, or is it a genuine inquiry about the scale of what you're doing and any further comment in respect to resource issues? I'm content with that.
Yeah, that's...
Not content to say to them why you're doing this and are you happy with the resources.
It's not saying why you're doing this. We note that you are doing this. What are the implications for resource? As you told us, your resources are tight. Words to that effect.
I'd like to see the words to that effect.
Yeah, okay, well, we'll certainly, we can do that.
And then come back to the meeting next week to clear it.
Bring draft back to the next week.
And in the meantime, we're content with the other two letters, the NIO and Select Affairs Committee.
Okay,
Yep.
so that'll be in our pack then for next week. That's fine.
Excuse me. Page 16, members, the outstanding correspondence. Page 3 of table packs, correspondence from the Department giving the committee advance notice of its intention to promote a legislative consent motion which will extend the provisions of the Westminster Childcare Payments Bill to Northern Ireland. This provides the statutory basis for a new scheme to give financial support to working families across the UK with the costs of their childcare. It will replace an existing government-funded scheme which currently provides financial assistance for parents with their childcare costs. I would be content, members, if you felt it would be appropriate that we ask for a briefing from departmental officials once this LCM has been laid. I also wonder whether it would be useful to get a briefing paper, a short paper from Assembly Research on what we have and what is proposed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Any desire to engage with stakeholders on this issue?
Chair, I think given the fact that there has been concerns raised about the previous initiative where there was a very poor uptake of it, maybe it would be worth finding out what more can be done this time to allow people to avail of that.
And what about stakeholders? Do you want to engage stakeholders on that issue?
I think it would do no harm given the fact that there was a very poor uptake of that.
Any other views on this?
I think some stage, Chair, you're going to have to talk to stakeholders, obviously. It's just whether you do it at the outset or a little bit.
Well, maybe I would suggest we commission the Assembly Research and take it from there. With a view to, once we see the LCM moving quickly to engage with the right external groups. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, item 6 is next, members, programme for government. This will be completed over 2 weeks, and this week we'll be considering PFG Commitment 31 and 32, which is the Social Investment Fund, 33, Childcare, 34 and 37, DSC, Delivering Social Change, 38 is Age Discrimination Legislation on GFS, Goods, Facilities and Services, and finally PFG Commitment 67, e-book Together Building a United Community. The other departmental commitments will be considered next week, but you already have those briefing papers, yeah?
Yes, they'll be in packs next week.
Okay. At page 20 then is the clerk's brief, and that's followed by a copy of the Hansard from the previous briefing from February of last year. The department provided a copy of its progress towards the relevant PFG targets at 10 to 4 yesterday afternoon. So those are your table packs from page 6 onwards. Okay, members, we welcome Gráinne Killen, Henry Johnson and Dennis McMahon from the department. Dennis, when were you aware that the papers would not be delivered within the protocol?
I suppose last week was obviously the date for having them with you.
Did you alert the clerk as a matter of courtesy or not?
I need to check that. I need to check. We would have. I mean, we'd have regular meetings, obviously, between our accounting liaison officer and the clerk.
Okay. Well, I suppose the good news is we've got all the papers for next week's session already. Okay. Over to you.
Okay, Chair. If you're happy enough, what we'll do is maybe just talk about where we are in the programme for government overall, and then maybe just take you through the particular commitments that relate to my particular directorate, and then Mark can cover his next week.
Yes.
So I don't know, Henry, if you want to say a few words just about where we are generally on.
Well, I talk a wee bit about the overall process, do a bit of introduction, and then I'll introduce Gráinne. I think this is our first time in front of the committee, and it's her job really to sort of drive the system through in terms of the oversight of delivery across the other departments and the 82 commitments. So we're here today to talk about the Q4 outturn. We commissioned the Q4 material from all the departments towards the end of March, and we now have all the material in, and we would hope that the Executive Programme Board would meet very shortly to close that off, and we will then be commissioning Q1 towards the end of this month. Gráinne, do you want to talk a wee bit about the detail behind that sort of bold?
Yeah, as Henry said, we commissioned progress reports from across all the government departments, including OFMDFM, on the 24th of March. These were collated and analysed by the central team, Programme for Government team, which includes some representation from Department of Finance and Personnel. And on the back of that, we produced a report for the Delivery Oversight Group, which is comprised of all the permanent secretaries. The Delivery Oversight Group met on the 16th of May to consider the progress against the Programme for Government and to develop a report for the Executive Programme Board. As part of that process, Malcolm McKibben, Head of the Civil Service, had a number of bilateral discussions with permanent secretaries, particularly in relation to where there were any issues in relation to the achievement of particular commitments. The Executive Programme Board will meet in the near future to consider the response proposed by the Delivery Oversight Group. So that's our process, and that's where we've got to at this stage.
So at this stage, obviously, there's still overall the performance is looking positive.
Looking positive, is looking probably better at this stage than the last programme for government. The other thing which we will be doing again shortly is that we have updates from all of the departments around the 82 commitments, and they will be put up on the web in the near future. We've now had updated delivery plans from all departments, including ourselves, and they'll be put up on the web shortly, which will give you a perspective right across the PFG in terms of where people are saying where they are in terms of delivery, and highlighting areas where there are difficulties.
Does anybody have oversight of your oversight? I'm thinking that this is like a 3-month process, Gráinne, if you're saying you kicked off on the 24th of March.
Yeah.
It seems quite laborious and labour intensive. Would that be a reasonable?
I suppose the process has been in place for some time now, and it has become more streamlined in the sense that we're monitoring 82 commitments. You could say it is quite a task to do on a quarterly basis, but we have the departments are fairly well up to speed with the process.
I think one thing is worth saying is we do get a lot of challenge in this process, and there's a lot of pushback. So, for example, in terms of our commitments, the team would work with DFP, who would comment on our commitments and whether they think if we're saying, well, we think we're going to achieve this commitment, they'll come back to us and say, well, we don't think you haven't got X, Y, or Z in place to be able to do that. So we do get there's a lot of challenge built into that process, and then that happens right through to the Executive Programme Board with the First Minister, Deputy First Minister and the Finance Minister, where ultimately we have to be able to account to them for our performance.
I think some of the material which departments rely on There are some issues in terms of the timing of the material which they get. For example, some of the DETI responses are very reliant on Invest NI pushing material through to them, and some of that can be delayed because they're waiting for consolidated business reports to come through. But what the team do between commissioning those reports at the end of March, getting them in at the beginning of April, and the delivery oversight group is there is a fairly intensive series of engagement with departments. But as Dennis said, it's really got a lot slicker now in terms of both that engagement with departments and also delivery oversight group. That's going quite well in terms of focusing in primarily on the ones that they're difficult with, and really not focusing just to berate people. It's really looking at what are there any remedial actions that can be taken, or if you can't deliver on that, what could be delivered on. I think it's a more it's aimed to be. You need to talk to other departments. It's aimed to be a more positive engagement and not just entirely negative, focusing on what people haven't achieved, but what could be done to improve achievement.
Okay. I mean, I'm conscious that I don't want to be comparing apples and pears here, but I think compared to, say, private sector, it's probably not as slick. And the private sector would do these sort of things almost live by the minute. But maybe I am trying to compare apples and pears.
Yeah, there's also an issue in terms of most departments. Any material that they do send on will require clearance within the department before they issue them externally. And that can take some time, depending on what departments and ministers are at.
I mean, it's a fair point. It's a fair point too that I suppose government does tend to be very paper-based in a lot of things, and whereas in the private sector there's a very clear, again from colleagues and friends who work in the private sector, there's a sense of, as you say, a very rapid response, but you're not necessarily waiting for detailed reports to come through. Or I suppose there is a slight difference in the sense of, it's particularly when you're working between different departments and ministers have responsibilities, and there's always a careful line to tread between, on the one hand, on a central perspective, making sure that things are being done, but then on the other hand, not cutting across ministers' responsibilities. And so we try to cut that line.
No, it's not to just correct what Dennis is. It's not an entirely paper-based system. That we have actually invested a bit in terms of an electronic system to support the back end of that. But last time around, one of the big problems was whole reams of paper feeds coming in and trying to cut and paste them and produce consolidated documents was not efficient.
Yeah, I suppose the main point is you can't look at OFMDFM as kind of joint chief executives and as departmental ministers as the equivalent of, say, HR manager, production manager, absolutely, sales manager.
Absolutely.
That does not hold water. Absolutely. Any members want to make any comments or questions on the overall scene before we get into the detailed PFG commitments? If not, we'll go straight there.
Okay, Chair, thank you very much. So the first ones I'm going to cover are 31 and 32, and these are this is the two commitments that relate to the Social Investment Fund. And again, just to remind members where we are and bring you up to speed, lead partners have been identified and vouching and verification has been completed on their organisations. The 10th of February, Ministers announced the first tranche of 23 projects, 12 of which are capital and 11 of which are revenue. And the lead partners were given letters of offer. Now we went through, we had a lead partner workshop on the 10th of March, and the idea was to provide an opportunity to really start to discuss the implementation in detail in a way that we hadn't been able to up until that point, because the projects, it wasn't clear exactly which projects were going forward and so on. Steering groups have continued to have regular meetings to monitor the progress of the programme. In fact, we had the steering groups at the event on the 10th of March. And where we are at the moment is we've got the letters of offer being finalised based on feedback we've been getting back from the lead partners. And we've got in place some additional capacity with assistance from the Strategic Investment Board to ensure that the plans that the lead partners are putting in place are deliverable and will achieve the objectives. And the aim is to get the letters of offer out for those 23 projects in their final form by the end of this month. In addition to that, then obviously we have a process to work through the remaining business cases, and that is underway. There are 34 remaining business cases of the 23 projects that have been announced. We're working as collectively with our finance colleagues and as necessary with the Department of Finance to make sure that we get those approved. And then that will, with the aim of having all of the projects committed, all of the expenditure committed by the end of the financial year.
The full 80 million?
Yes, that's the intention of having it committed, albeit that there'll be a profile of spend that'll go beyond that, obviously.
Beyond the CSR, presumably, yes. Yeah, but and that sounds like a development, a significant development, Dennis, that the commitment to spend can be done in this financial year.
That's what we're aiming to do. We're aiming to have all of the letters of offer out by the end of this financial year. And then that will be a formal contractual commitment with the lead partners.
In terms of the risks to the delivery of PFG 31 and 32, it seems that there's been no change in the main risk, the timing of executive and business case approvals affecting the ability to make programme operational and spend the allocated budget. Still a probability of 5 out of 5 highest, and the impact, if that is the case, 4 out of 5. Presumably, as that has been consistent for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, business cases, and again, you'll have heard this from colleagues. It's something right across the executive. It's something that we're looking at because business cases are a huge challenge, both in terms of making sure that we're spending money and getting good value for taxpayers' money, but on the other hand, also making sure that we're not turning it into a process. And go back to the earlier point about process for process sake. And I suppose the added complication with this is when you normally see a business case coming into a department, normally you'll have an arm's length body or a trust or a community and voluntary sector organisation will have spent a period of time thinking about it beforehand, will have done the planning and so on, and a lot of the groundwork. And usually a business case will come in and there'll always be some pushback as to economists or finance colleagues saying, well, this is wrong and that's wrong. But usually there's a lot of thinking has gone into it. In fairness, on this occasion, we had a lot of thinking around the plans and the groups, and that reflects the fact that really what ministers wanted and what they've tried to set up here is a participative democracy process here, where people are getting a chance to create things from the ground up. So in some cases, some of the projects have come forward and they've been very well thought through because they've been projects maybe that people have had ideas about for years and they've just filtered their way in through the planning process at a local level. And other projects, I suppose, have been maybe not as well thought through, and maybe just not as, it's clear that the steering groups knew what they wanted, but maybe hadn't just got a clear handle on how they wanted it delivered. So that has definitely created an additional level of challenge in this particular case. And I suppose I'll be very honest with you, we've looked at this and we have an internal commitment to try, and if we're going to get these letters out by the end of the year, we need to have these approvals really in place over the next 3 or 4 months. That's what we're trying to do. And, looking at it honestly, you have to say, well, that's 2 a week, 2 or 3 a week. Is that anything like the rate that we've approved it so far? Probably not, is the honest answer. And in fairness, is that the sort of rate of approval you would get across all the departments if you were dealing with that number of business cases? Probably not. So we're trying to find ways to do that more, and actually, to use your terminology from earlier, in real time. So we've set up a team, myself and Mark. Mark, who's the accounting officer, obviously has responsibility for the finance side, the economist on my side. And we've set up a team and just said, look, get the lead partners in real time, write the business case instead of a case of we'll put it back to the consultants will put it back to us, we'll send to lead partners and ask for additional information. Actually have them all in the room, spend 2 days a week and just thrash it out and lock the door until you get the business cases approved. Well, not quite lock the door, but you know what I mean.
No work away.
So that's what we're trying to do. So we'll see how that goes, but we are, this is something certainly that we're focusing on because it's been a huge challenge to get at this point, and if we're going to get these letters of offer out, we're going to need to get through this. I think the other little worry I have about that, which is it's reflected in the risk, but maybe it's just something that's it's reflected as 2 in the risk at the moment. It's down at number 4 there. High quality design and delivery of interventions to meet need. The more we look at the and the more we discuss this with the lead partners, it's clear that as people are thinking about things, new issues are arising, which is natural again because these are the people who are having to deliver these things on the ground. So to some extent, that is also a risk, I suppose, beyond the business cases. There's a real danger here. We focus all our attention, get the business cases through, push it through, get the letters of offer out, tick the box, and then really when we get to the actual delivery phase, we're not getting the outcomes we need. But I suppose on the positive side of all of that, while it's a negative that it is taking longer, and nobody could argue otherwise, I think the more positive side of that is at least I think we will get, hopefully, projects that really will deliver better outcomes in the long term. And that's something that's a lot of feedback we're getting, even through our wider work on delivering social change, is that we've made a lot of progress, we've pushed through a lot of work on delivering social change, but actually it's really important to take the time to make sure you're evaluating it and you're getting the right outcomes. And it's a point you've made and the committee's made in terms of other projects such as childcare. So that's what.
Yeah, no, thank you. Just two observations, if I may, before I bring the Deputy Chair in. I think it was back, was it 2007 or 8, when I was involved in setting up the Victims Commission. We started off in temporary accommodation in Goodwood House and were told we had to move, and found a floor of Windsor House, which we got actually at a bargain because the statutory body who were in there were moving out. So we were very pleased with ourselves, and then we were threatened by the department that they wouldn't write the cheques because there was no business case, not for moving to Windsor House, but for the Commission to have a permanent home. So I would like to think we've moved a bit from that position where you can't possibly have a Victims Commission without having an office. And I suppose the other thing is, I sometimes feel collectively we wait and wait and wait because we're trying to find the right answer. Whereas certainly again in the private sector, there would be a realisation there isn't a right answer. There are a series of options, all of which have downsides. And eventually you're going to have to make a decision, pick an option, knowing there's a downside and managing that. And I hope again that maybe there's a more kind of private sector spirit coming in to saying, okay, it's never going to be 100% out of 100, but it's good enough to go with, realising that we're going to have to manage the imperfections.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Absolutely.
Chris Little.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your update. Officials, the PFG Commitment 3132 Social Investment Fund is obviously a significant OFMDFM responsibility, £80 million worth of expenditure originally by the end of 14-15 to tackle dereliction and deprivation. Probably, some of the most common issues I'm sure all MLAs get raised with them. Need for regeneration, need to tackle social disadvantage. So I'm keen to assess progress, but also keen to assess how fair and accurate the updates that we're providing in relation to this are. The update that we've received, unless I'm wrong, says that whilst this commitment is not likely to be achieved in the timescale initially envisaged, as I say, that timescale was £80 million expenditure by the end of 15. When exactly is it likely to be fully expended then?
Well, we would expect again, happy to be corrected on this, Henry, but we're looking at a planning timescale of around the end of 17-18 to have the majority of that. Now, the only issue about that is that we need to, as I mentioned before, when we had this discussion with the lead partners, to some extent, we weren't sure what to expect because because this was community driven, we thought some of the lead partners would be, let's just say that some of them were a bit more surprised about what the projects looked like than we'd maybe expected when we had that conversation. So there was some of them were obviously very closely involved. Some of them were looking at this for the first time and saying, we're just going to have to look at these again. This is great, this is what the community wants, but we maybe have to do it a slightly different way.
I think in terms of their own role, a number of organisations were put forward as lead partner and led an understanding of what lead partner meant. I think at that workshop session, there was a number of people who were put forward as lead partners. I don't really want to be a lead partner. I'm actually more interested in being the delivery agent, not the lead partner. So there was a bit of changing around there. And there was a number of particularly councils that were meant to come a bit more centre stage once that became clear that people were much more interested in delivering services as opposed to oversight of delivery by another agent. But I think, as Dennis said earlier, the intention is at the end of this financial year we will have made all of the commitment in relation to 80 million. We will not have spent all of the 80 million, and our estimate at this stage is that will go forward into the 17-18 year. But until all those letters of offer are finalised and out, and the lead partners and the putative delivery agents have worked out what their delivery plan will be, particularly around capital projects. And as Dennis said earlier, normally a lot of these projects have been worked up for eons, and you're picking up something which are very, very clear in terms of what the delivery project will be. Some of these are very new ideas, and capital projects have a tendency to overrun both in cost terms and in time terms. That's something we'll be looking at over the course of this year.
So it's a long way.
Chair just reminded to declare an interest as a member of East Belfast Area Steering Group in relation to the Social Investment Fund. Can I ask, just in follow-up as well, Dennis, just to clarify, you said you're expecting full expenditure by the end of FY 17-18 then? Okay. And can I ask how exactly the lead partners were appointed then, if there has been a degree of difficulty in relation to their appointment?
Well, no, there hasn't been difficulty. I mean, again, this is a very different way of working for departments and for us. And the lead partners were proposed, as you remember, by the steering groups. In some cases, the lead partners were very closely involved in that process, and in other cases, they were
more surprised.
They were, well, if not surprised, they were happy enough to be identified. But then, when we sort of talked them through, this is the project, this is what the plan says in more detail, they were looking at it going, not sure we can deliver it that way, or maybe there's a different way of looking at this. So I suppose what I was trying to say was that again, it reflects the bottom-up approach here, but it means in turn that we have to be able to accept that, as a department, from the department's point of view, we have to be able to accept that some of these lead partners will come back and they'll give us plans and profiles which maybe differ from what we'd originally expected. Okay. I mean, the reason I say, the reason I say 17-18, so that it's open and transparent, is simply because that seems, based on previous sort of expenditure, that seems like a reasonable period of time to ramp up expenditure on these projects, and particularly the capital projects.
Okay. Well, if I can follow up on open and transparency, the update that we have is that all of the funds will be indicatively allocated in the near future, with a drawdown over a longer period of time. And the online report in relation to this, which is the public's window into monitoring the government's progress on its behalf, states that good progress has been made with regards to business case. This is all the information that's available publicly. Good progress has been made with securing approvals to business cases. Lead partners have been identified, due diligence undertaken. Steering groups have continued to meet. They oversee the delivery of the programme. Detailed monitoring framework is under development. Do you think that's adequately detailed information for this committee and the public, given that you're able to say you expect full expenditure in 2018, and given that appears to be 3 years later than the original date set?
Well, that was the position, and that was the position at the last quarter. Obviously, that's going to be updated. But I mean, but even with that, I mean, there's nothing there that's untrue and was untrue at that stage. Good progress has been made in the sense of, I mean, well, there's two ways of looking at it. Has good progress been made in terms of meeting the original commitment and what we originally wanted to do? Obviously not. I mean, that's and so we're not hiding that in the sense of, and people are very well aware that we haven't been able to meet our timeline that was originally in the commitment. But the other side of that, I think, is has a lot of work been put into this, and have we tried to develop something from scratch that really did need and does need more early input than maybe everybody had originally anticipated. I think that good progress has been made on that front, and that's really what we've tried to reflect in the report.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Anybody else on this commitment before we move on?
Yeah, thanks very much for the information. Can I just make one observation, though? you, Dennis, said that in terms of the overall state of play when it comes to delivery across the PFG commitments, that you said it was positive, or more positive than it was in the last. And I think if you actually analyse that, that may be slightly extravagant. So when you actually go through the 11 delivery PFG commitments, for reasons beyond your control, the Maze Long cash is somewhat uncertain. We haven't agreed any changes, which might be a good thing, to post 15 structures of government. Money has been returned in this monitoring round because things haven't been taken forward in respect to the one plan. We don't know really. We don't. I think we're a bit uncertain about whether there's going to be a 20% drawdown of competitive EU funds. Whether SIF and DSC is delivered is somewhat subject to whether you get money out of monitoring rounds, because you put in a very substantial bid, some of which is described as unescapable or inescapable pressures. So I think we're a bit uncertain about where we are in age discrimination legislation. We don't know where we are in welfare. So I think if you actually go through the 12 PFG, it's to put it at its best, it's a bit of a curate's egg. It is positive in places like London Derry City of Culture, but I think if you actually analyse the 12, that mightn't be the most accurate description, as I would see it anyway.
Well, can I just point out?
Can I just, sorry, I'll let you answer, Dennis, but just to be clear, members, I thought we'd agreed we would go through the PFG commitments one by one rather than take a...
Yeah, it's just an overall comment before I go through them one by one.
Just one point of clarification, to say that when I was referring to the overall state of play, I was talking about the programme for government overall across all departments, so all of the commitments. So I wasn't picking out the 11 OFMDFM targets. So just so.
Well, I can't comment about where everybody else is. I don't interrogate the FG commitments in our department that way, but certainly that's the conclusion I would draw about this department. So my questions in respect of 31, 32 are, you were very honest in admitting that when it came to processing business cases, it hadn't been necessarily that successful, and the rate in which you have to progress now, you said probably 3 or 4 week. I don't know if that's true or not, but maybe 3 or 4 a month. But whatever, I would just be a wee bit circumspect that based upon where we are over the last 3 years of the SIF, that managing all those business cases between now and March of next year, history doesn't suggest that the pace will pick up to such an extent, despite the mitigation measures that you introduced to achieve that outcome. And if you like, it's corroborated by the fact that whilst the initial commitments were made, you said in your evidence that letters of offer in final form in relation to those who already received letters of offer will be out by the end of the month. That's 2 weeks. So it'd be interesting to know within 2 weeks if the letters of offer in final form, whatever that means, as opposed to letters of offer. And you might explain what is the difference between letters of offer and letters of offers in final form, what the difference might mean. In respect of the letters of offer that are out at the moment or in final form, has a shortfall been identified, especially when it comes to capital commitments, in that the costings of the capital commitment that you've entered into are ending up being higher than what it was that you anticipated? And can you confirm, in respect of the capital commitments that you've entered into so far in some form, and soon to be in final form, whether Plan Commission in respect of all those capital commitments exists or will exist by the end of the month when you are going to issue your letter of offer in final form?
Okay, there's quite a lot there. I mean, just to start with the issue about business cases, I wouldn't disagree with what you're saying about the evidence. I mean, what I was really trying to say is a lot of good progress has been made. I mean, I would say that. I mean, again, from your own experience or experience of people working with departments in terms of business cases and how much time it can take to get a business case through, and it's across the system just because there's so much scrutiny and so on. If you look at to get 23 through with a reasonably small team, and even the consultancy fees have been spent so far, when you look at what it normally costs to pay to get a normal Green Book appraisal through, you can see that actually it's been done at a very low cost, relatively speaking, and at quite a pace. But that was why I wanted to draw it to the committee's attention, that's the reason that risk is so high, because my concern is that if we're serious about trying to do this, and we are serious about it, then that really brings us down to some very tight timescales. And you're absolutely right, we're going to have to see how the mitigation measures work. And I think that that will be, but I suppose it was to reassure the committee that we're not just sitting here hoping that that it'll all come through. We're actually trying different ways to move the situation on. I think then in terms of letters of offer, just to say a little bit about the difference between the draft and the full or the complete letters of offer. And really, we put out letters of offer which were specified in terms of the business cases that we put through. So they reflected. There were standard conditions in them that you'd expect in any letter of offer, and over and above that then we had conditions in them which were about, here are specific things that the business case is says you're to deliver, so they need to be included in this. And then there were other things such as other issues such as preconditions around, if before you can spend money, you need to actually own the site, or you need to make sure we own the site in a way that to make sure the money's been spent appropriately. So those kind of specific things were in there as well. So what we did was we put that out to the lead partners initially. And as I say, in some cases the lead partners said, absolutely fine, we've been working on this for years, we want to do this. In other cases, the lead partners came back and said, we can't deliver this the way you've set it out, so we need to negotiate with you and discuss how we can take this forward in a different way. So the final letters of offer reflect all of that discussion. Now, even then, I think it's probably worth saying that, and you're absolutely right about 2 weeks. 2 weeks is crucial. We need to get these out, and we're working extremely hard to make some. The team is working extremely hard to make sure that happens. But the reality is that even then, some of these cases, some of these will need to do some, the letters of offer will be structured and there will be a contract. So that will be us saying, here's the contract, this is the commitment, this is the money going out. But that money will obviously be phased. So, you will expect, for example, in capital, you'll spend something when a certain percentage of the build is done, a certain percentage of design is done, and so on. And at the beginning, in almost all of the cases, they will need to put together a detailed project plan and documentation to be able to say, here's exactly how we're going to deliver all of this.
Well, could I ask to sort of cut to the bit, of those who receive letters of offers, can you say in the middle of June if some of those who receive letters of offers will not receive letters of offer in final form?
We are working on the basis that they will all have received letters of offer in their final. All of those initial projects will have received their letters of offer in their final form. That's what we're working on by the end of June.
I'd like to move on to the next one, which is 33 childcare. Just before we do, Dennis, in the narrative under strategic context, you say delivering social change as 118 million, currently allocated to March 2016, 92 of the 118 is available during the period of the CSR. Therefore, 26 is not. What's the story with the 26?
Would you want to?
The 26 was when the ministers made the announcement around the 6 signature programmes in October 2012. They were costed at £26 million, and at that stage it was agreed that that £26 million would be taken out of the funds which have been earmarked for SIF and for childcare, but would be made re-available in the next CSR period. That's where the 26.
So the 118 has been split into two.
Yes, 92.
Yes.
Okay. Childcare then, 33.
Okay. Well, again, there'll be some of this people will be familiar with, but maybe just to go over it. First phase of the Bright Start Childcare Strategy was launched in September 2013, included 15 key first actions. And just to remind the committee, all of the key first actions were underway at the end of March 2014, particularly the Bright Start School Age Childcare Grant Scheme, which was launched on the 27th of March. The grant scheme will take forward the key first actions 1, 2 and 5, which aim to create or sustain up to 7,000 school-aged childcare places by making available up to 15 million in grants over the period of 2014 to 2017. The deadlines for applications were the 9th of May, and we now have a series of applications in from childcare providers. So we're currently in the process of, the childcare partnerships obviously are working on this on our behalf, and they're working through the 76 applications received at the moment. And also there are 60 expressions of interest. Childcare partnerships, sub-regional strategic funding panels will meet on the 17th of June to the 25th of June to assess formally the 76 applications. And the aim is to issue the first letters of offer before September 2014. So that's where we are at the moment. And obviously there's work then underway in beginning to develop the childcare strategy, which can only be talking to colleagues about. And
the committee noted a little earlier, Dennis, the potential need for a legislative consent motion with regard to the childcare payments bill coming out of Westminster. What is your assessment of the impact that may have on this PFG commitment?
Well, again, we'll need to see what. Obviously, that'll need to be agreed by the executive and by the assembly. But subject to that, we would hope that will increase capacity. And the last time we were talking about childcare at the committee, I suppose it was very clear that we needed to be very sensitive to the market to make sure that if this is actually increasing uptake, ideally this should increase uptake. It should be a good thing. It should be a good thing for both in terms of access to childcare, but it should be a good thing in terms of also helping the market. But there will still be market problems with the market, which will need to be addressed through additional funding programs to try to improve capacity. So it's really a case of we will need to make sure that our scheme is sensitive to market demands and any market demands that change as a result of this.
If we cut and paste and bring through the Westminster legislation as an LCM, what is the actual impact in Northern Ireland? What changes?
Well, the main thing is that it basically offers parents an opportunity, maybe who couldn't afford childcare before. It offers this additional government funding to ensure that comes from the Treasury, to ensure that more people are able to actually access childcare spaces by putting money into a childcare savings account. Basically, that's the way the model works. So the idea is that we should. The idea is that more people will be able to actually access this. So for every £8 that a parent pays towards childcare costs, the idea is that government will make a top-up payment of £2. And the value of government support will be capped at a maximum of £2,000 per child each year if this model were to come through. So there'll be no restriction on the number of children for whom the support will be available. So the idea that more people will be able to access childcare. So from that point of view, it should be something that should drive the need for additional capacity in the marketplace, which is good. But in addition to that, it means that from our point of view, we need to make sure that we're not, cutting across that by funding projects which either undercut existing private childcare providers or other providers that are already in place. So that's the main implication for us.
Has there been any change since we last spoke about your attitude towards private sector provision in this area?
Well, ministers obviously have announced the scheme, and the idea is that this is it's going to be a social. It was to be a social investment model, and that's the way the scheme was announced and launched. But there is still scope for private childcare settings, particularly ones who maybe don't make a huge profit anyway, to using the social investment model to actually apply for funding.
I think last time we were into a debate about what a word like substantial means in terms of, you know, substantially reinvesting. Is there any more clarity on these definitions?
Well, we have detailed guidance out now, and so be happy to forward that to the committee if that's helpful.
Yes, I would. Yeah, please. Once again, Deputy Chair, Chris Little.
Thanks, Chair. Can I ask by when will the 12 million budget for improving access to affordable childcare be expended?
Not for at least 2 years beyond this one. That's where we are now.
Okay, and
With
the original milestone was the end of FY 14-15.
Right. So it's
Okay.
it has taken longer.
Okay, but the update says that target is achievable.
Well, it's a fair point.
That childcare funding has also been used to fund the existing childcare provision. So this is on top of that. So there has been some expenditure during earlier bits of the CSR.
Sorry, Henry, could you speak up a wee bit? I missed that.
There was some expenditure in early years of the CSR out of this £12 million, but as Dennis said, even with the expenditure on Bright Start this year, we will not achieve the £12 million by the end of this financial year, and it will be at least another year and a half before that £12 million in total would be used.
Yeah, I think it is a fair. I mean, to be honest with you, it's a fair point as well. Maybe we can look at the declaration again. I mean, I should say there was, to be honest with you, there's a bit of an internal debate about this generally about declarations, because on the one hand, we need to keep these current and reflect the real position. But on the other hand, there's a view that that was the commitment we signed up to. Now, we have changed them elsewhere, so I think it's reasonable to say it's probably more useful to people to have.
No, well, there's a generic point, which this one really illustrates pretty well. If you read what the commitment says, publish and implement the childcare strategy with key actions to provide integrated and affordable childcare. And arguably at the end of the period you could tick that. However, you will not have achieved the milestones. So there's a number of these commitments where there's a mismatch between what the commitment says at a high level. The commitment might say something like improve or reduce, and then the milestones were given specific targets. So that's an issue we've identified, and sort of a mismatch of the wording in some of these commitments between the high level element and the lower level annual specific targets.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a key issue. So I think one has to welcome progress that has been made in relation to childcare provision. But the key milestone here is by the end of FY 14-15, achieve expenditure, which I believe is £12 million, and the key milestones in the strategy. And then the declaration is, I confirm that this commitment is achievable. And you've just told us that it's not achievable.
The milestone is not achievable
for at least a year and a half.
So I think it's fair. I think it is fair to say maybe that's something we could clarify in the declaration. I think that is a fair point.
Yeah.
And again, that's information that's not. It's available to our committee, but the online reporting tool that was heralded as an improved way for public access to this information does not contain that either.
No, now the online reporting tool, as I said earlier, that the information which is currently publicly available is only up until the end of the last calendar year. And we'd hope in coming weeks to get that up online, which would give the update on all 82 commitments to the end of the financial year 13-14.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Okay.
Last one question: Is the spending of the remaining expenditure? Is it your intention to have that by the end of 15-16 or 16-17?
terms of the £12 million, we need to come back to you on that. It could well be actually 15, 16 when you take into account the expenditure which will already be made in early years, the CSR. I think, do you want to talk about the wider Bright Start budget?
Dennis answered, in his answer said
2 years after I said
2 years after this one.
And the reason
suggests that it is the end of 17.
Well, the basis for that, I suppose it just depends on how quickly, again, the expenditure ramps up, because at the minute we're assessing the 76 applications, or the childcare partnerships are assessing the 76 applications, so we really need to see what those look like and what sort of spending profiles they've got in them before I could answer that more definitively. That's the reason. But it's not that. But my expectation is, I just, again, based on previous experience, I just don't see us doing that in 1 year. It's going to take 3 years, I think. That's where we are at the minute.
You agree with that, Henry?
I agree with that. It's just I'm not sure, and I need to come back to you with what have we actually got banked to date. Certainly, I agree with Dennis that it's going to be a good while before we get a rapid spend on the new programmes. I'm just not clear at the table exactly how much we spent to date.
Sorry,
where are we in respect of developing plans for the spending of the residue of the 12 million?
Well, a lot of that spend will be through those 7,000 places, but in addition to that, there are other measures that other departments are working on. For example, DARD and DRD are working together on rural childcare and additional rural childcare places, and also some rural transport projects. So those are due to be worked up and launched. They're working them up at the minute, but they're due to be launched in the autumn. So we'll obviously see what those look like as well, but that's happening at the moment. And of course, in addition to that, I suppose there's also the work on the family support website that has been going on with the aim of getting a new application, a new app-based website into place to help provide parents and providers with the information they need to, again, to improve the market.
Okay.
Chair, could I just say a wee quickie on that one? In the strategic context, you mentioned the 3 magic words within 2 paragraphs. One of them is that the costs, I'm talking about, of childcare, they must be affordable, there must be good value for money, and they must be sustainable. What work has been done to see if those 3 can be accommodated?
Well, the main work, funny enough, we talked about the issue of business cases earlier, and I think this is an example of where the business case process has really added a lot of value to it, and we have been, and it has added some delay, but we've actually gone through quite a detailed process to examine the value for money of this scheme overall, and obviously the criteria and the projects that come forward will have to be compliant with that. So, and part of that will be about sustainability, will be about making sure that we're not creating places that are going to need to be funded forever. The idea is that these places are going to need to, now in some cases that may just be necessary because you're talking about areas that just wouldn't sustain childcare provision otherwise. But the idea is that as far as possible, this will be funding for a period of time to increase the capacity, and that then it will become sustaining in its own right. So that's the sort of work that's been going on, and we have had a lot of challenge. I mean, we went back to we have a finance subcommittee that basically tests every business case to destruction and makes sure that we're we know what we're talking about, and we went through 4 phases of that to get this business case approved and to get it out.
So has that been benchmarked against the private sector?
Benchmarked in the sense of, yes,
good value for money.
It's been benchmarked.
It can only be that, can't it?
Right.
It can only be the private sector.
Yeah, it has to be. We have to look at existing demand and supply, and that's what we've used to form the business case.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members, delivering social change comprises PFG 34 and 37, and it's next.
Okay. Well, Henry maybe could talk about this in a bit more detail in terms of the signature projects, but I suppose the main thing to say is that there has been a lot of work on this across a number of departments, and our focus now is making sure that we're evaluating this, that we're monitoring the outputs from this. But there has been good progress in terms of getting in place teachers to do additional literacy and numeracy, and we've had reports back from, again, a lot of them are qualitative at this stage because it's still the early stages of full implementation, but we're getting a lot of reports back that it's actually making a difference, and schools and parents and teachers are reporting this back. And there are a range of other measures that maybe Henry wants to take us through in a bit more detail.
Yeah, I think we've reported separately, there's been pretty good progress in all 6 of the October 12 announced signature projects. The literacy and numeracy programme has been going quite well. I don't know if there's anybody here. There was a Celebrating Success event which Department of Education ran Department buildings last week, and they had a number of teachers, newly qualified teachers, and one existing teacher who'd benefited from the programme, and we're starting to get some very positive messages back in terms of the impact of the programme on children. On all of the programmes, by September last year, we had agreed with the lead department how they would be evaluating the programme. Those evaluation processes are now well in place in most programmes, and we've been recently holding a series of bilateral meetings with departments, because one of the things we're keen to do with the signature programmes is not only to look at them in the ways we've always looked at them, but to use this as an opportunity to look at other ways of evaluating the effectiveness of programme delivery. And we're trying to pilot an approach called outcome-based accountability on these programmes, which looks not only at the thing we're trying to achieve at a population level, but also in terms of the programme itself. How effective was the programme in terms of the quality of the delivery? And I think that's a key thing in terms of whether departments will mainstream these programmes going forward.
So is this the interim evaluation as referenced in Key Action 10 you're talking about, Henry?
In the plan?
In the plan, yeah. And we're intending that there'll be an event in October where we'll be feeding back to a wider public what the initial results are. Now, some of the programmes are obviously a longer lead time in terms of literacy and numeracy. One of the things we will have will be the difference in predicted grades, but it may be a while filtering through in terms of the GCSE outcomes, what the real grades are for those children.
But again, in terms of the length of time for taking the process, I'm just interested because the Key Action 10 says it begins in March 2014. Is it really going to take to October, what, eight months to do that evaluation?
Well, I think in fairness, what we're talking about evaluating the performance, but the idea is initially to get monitoring. And the idea initially at this stage, what we're looking for from departments is to get a set of data to say here's how they're actually performing. But to some extent, we're going to need to wait until, some of these things, as Henry's indicated, for example, in terms of the teachers, we need to see what the actual exam results are before we can do a proper evaluation of it. But in the meantime, we're trying to get as much information as we possibly can. For example, around things like, we're looking at measures of self-efficacy and local control, which are about basically teachers and young people maybe feeling more in control of their environment and how they're able to participate. So these are the sorts of things that we're trying to look at as early measures.
Yeah, we're looking for initial figures out of departments for the middle of July, but a lot of those, they may have crude numbers in terms of the number of teachers that have been deployed, the number of children that benefited from the programmes, some early results, but they may not have all the systems in place to maybe capture some of the quality measures, and that's what we're working at. And it's really on those qualitative aspects, a lot of which will be survey based around parents, teachers, and the children who are in the programmes. So the literacy and numeracy programme has rolled out quite well. There has been a slight supply issue around teachers, and the Department of Education are out for hopefully their final tranche for a very small number of teachers. They've been unable to get to date. but I think all schools have benefited from bank teachers to at least pick up some of the slack in terms of that delivery. The nurture programmes, all those nurture units are now operational, and they've had cohorts of children through all of those programmes. The DEL programmes in terms of community family support, they've had at least one cohort run through that. It's going well. On the Department of Health and Social Services side, the family support hubs are well established outside of Belfast. Belfast has been slower to get to market, but the first 2 of those are coming on stream this month, and the rest should be coming on stream shortly over the summer. There has been a difficulty with one of the parenting interventions which we were looking to do because the supplier has withdrawn from the market. So DHS SPS are looking at alternatives on that, potentially looking at other programmes going forward. And finally, hopefully not left anybody out, in relation to the social enterprise hubs, they have been the slowest to get to market. DSD had some difficulty in identifying suitable premises, but they are now coming online, and I think our ministers will be launching the first of those who will have both services and buildings in place, I think, in a fortnight's time.
If I could go again to the risk register, what I'm not seeing is anything with regard to the finances, and I'm noting in the original set of milestones was the establishment of the Historical Institutional Abuse Inquiry, and the fact that in last week's financial papers it was made clear that there was a hefty or a significant bid in June monitoring for the HIA, and in the risks in that paper it said without the money the inquiry folds. It's not on the risk register.
Yeah, I suppose it is probably not an unreasonable point to put in resources as a risk. I mean, we are very aware of resources generally as a risk at the minute, just given the tighter nature of finances and the difficult decisions that ministers are making over the next year or so. So I think it probably is reasonable to put it in now. If you remember, I mean, this is, I suppose this was an example of where we were trying to act in a more flexible way when delivering social change, when ministers set up delivering social change, because the idea was we've got significant resources that weren't at that stage going to be spent through the social investment fund. And there was scope then to move resources into this to try to progress some of the objectives of the social investment fund while we were setting it up. And indeed that has happened, and to some extent the fact that we're now having to bid for extra money is a good thing, in the sense that we're getting the money's been spent, programmes are underway, and it definitely the early feedback coming back is that these programmes can and will make a difference and are making a difference. So I think it's reasonable for us to look at that as adding that in as an additional risk into the plan, and just to keep to monitor it. I mean, obviously, we do depend on central funds, and we have to bid for central funds. And I suppose when you look at where we are now, I kind of use the term sometimes, it's a better quality of problem. We can still get a problem, but the problem is maybe that now we're delivering more, and that means then we have to rely on central bids more. So that's where we are. But
I think the other thing, there's a slight timing issue here, that this was compiled at the end of March, and I think it's really only once we got into June monitoring and the scale of the challenges for victims and for HIA became clear that. So I think that certainly I'd want to see that reflected in the revised plan.
Yeah, I think to me it's another argument for that kind of lifetime updating of things as we go. I mean, the committee, I mean, I think committee and department, some people feel that was kind of exemplary, the way the committee worked with the department to amend and improve and bring forward the legislation. So for us, I just don't think it is an option to see the abuse inquiry fold through lack of resource. And if we feel that way, goodness knows how the victims feel, having waited so long. I
mean, I know ministers will see this as an absolute priority as well, so I would be very surprised if the inquiry was in any way put at risk. I don't see that happening at all.
Okay. Members, anything on this chapter before we move? And if not, 38 is next, which is age discrimination legislation.
I mean, I suppose the situation on the age discrimination legislation is that we still don't have a decision on the scope of the proposed legislation. But ministers have agreed that officials can engage with other departments on a without prejudice basis to discuss and explore the implications of the various options available for progressing the legislation. I suppose what that means is we're looking at what are the implications, because you start off from a position of saying, well, this legislation would outlaw discrimination in terms of goods, facilities and services. And then it's a case of saying, well, what particular implications would that have? And it's almost the things that you're not, that aren't obvious, that they're things we need to watch out for and understand, because, for example, holidays offered to certain age groups, and issues around free public transport at a certain age, and there's things like that we need to make sure we're taking into account. So we're having those conversations with departments, but ministers were very open previously about this when they were up in front of the committee, that there were issues of policy that needed to be agreed around the scope. So that's where we are at the moment.
And as you say in your declaration, you confirm this commitment presents a challenge.
It certainly does, yes, because obviously within the timescale that's left, in order to get this through, I suppose, just the normal stages of legislation, you've got consultation on the policy, introduction, coming to the committee stage, and I mean, this is a significant bill which the committee will have, I would expect, a great deal of interest in, and would want to, scrutinise in great detail. So, yeah, I mean, all of that's going to make it a very tight timescale.
We did discuss this, I think, Dennis, previously, in terms of getting it over the line in this mandate. When does the process have to begin in earnest? It has to.
We would have to be in. We would have to be in a position where we could go out and consult in the autumn. That would have to happen. I mean, you're talking about to get something like this through. Now, the only I would put in there is, if you were talking about accelerated passage for something like this, that would be different. But nobody is talking about that.
No,
so
no.
I'm not saying that for a minute. But it's just that would be the only caveat. But yeah, I mean, you're talking about going through consultation and going to the executive and then introducing the bill, and the second stage and then the committee stage. And again, something like this, the committee stage, you're going to want to give this a lot of scrutiny, I would have thought.
So the autumn, is that predicated on the committee just taking the statutory minimum time, or are you allowing us, if we should say we need?
Well, we're trying to work up a broad timescale which would take us right up to March 2016 for enactment. And so to go through all of those stages, we've tried to kind of work through what a broad timescale would look like, including 6 weeks for the committee stage. But that would still, there would be maybe scope elsewhere to squeeze things if need be, if the committee stage took longer.
But it really would be squeezing.
It would be squeezing it elsewhere. I mean, it's the nature of legislation like this. It's just there's a huge amount of legislation, and it just needs to be.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thinking needs to go.
In the absence of other questions, then it's 67. Together building a united community.
Yep. So progress has been made on all of the 7 headline actions in the Together Building a United Community strategy. We've now got senior responsible owners in each lead department have developed project plans and key milestones and budget profiles. And a report's been prepared for discussion at the next meeting of the ministerial panel. So we're hoping that that will then in turn allow ministers to take decisions about how they want to prioritise resources in order to support the various projects. We've had an announcement of 2 of the 4 urban villages, Lower Newton Ards Road and Colin. And we're also undertaking a comprehensive review of the delivery of the structure, delivery and impact of existing funding delivery mechanisms. We're also undertaking work with the Equality and Good Relations Commission, with the Equality Commission and CRC representatives. And obviously you're going to be talking about the consultation exercise and the new good relations indicators after this session. Similarly, the OFMDFM's taken on, there's been good work, and some of my colleagues are here, but good work underway to make the summer school camp pilots operational and to do some initial work in 2014. But again, I suppose all of these things will depend on some of the bids, and you'll have seen some of that coming forward in the section last week on the June monitoring. So that's just a broad picture of where we are at the minute. But I think, in fairness, and one thing I would say is we've had really good joined up working with other departments on this. We have had other departments coming forward and really stepping up to the plate. So just to pay tribute to colleagues in other departments who have been putting their plans together and are trying to get everything in place so that as and when resources are made available, we're able to take this forward. And in the meantime, obviously, there are lower cost options that are being looked at and taken forward as well within the strategy.
Does TBUC have a budget?
It doesn't have a. It has various budgets. There are various budgets that are taking forward elements of TBUC already.
Could you talk us through those?
So there are developments going on, for example, in housing and in other areas that would have budgets associated with them. I don't have all the detailed figures in front of me. Apologies, Chair, but and again, would be happy to follow up on that. But I suppose there are three levels in terms of the overall need here. The first level is existing budgets, and some of which will be supplemented by, for example, the likes of Piece 4, where departments will be and other organisations will be bidding in through that. And we're also looking at around housing, for example, seeing whether there are central treasury funds that could be that we could access, that we could bid for. In addition to that, then we're looking at what are the additional central requirements, so in terms of central funding that we would need to bid for. And that would be the purpose of, once the ministerial panel has had a chance to discuss these proposals, we'll be putting forward those options to ministers to agree. And then the third level is to say, well, okay, there's some bigger things that'll need more time to work through. And so, you know, when people tend to mention very big figures, they tend to think about the full commitments. So, for example, if we were talking about all of the shared educational campuses and you were to add that up, that's potentially a very large figure. But at this stage, there's a lot of developmental work that needs to be done on those projects before we can finalise those figures. So, I mean, you know, you take, for example, Lisnelly. Lisnelly's been going for some years, and there was about £3 million spent on or allocated for exemplar design. And it's only when that process is done and that work's done that we get a sense of what the whole site is going to cost, and that'll be done over a period of years. So I think it's important to distinguish between, you know, when people talk about big numbers in terms of together building a community, they're maybe thinking about a longer term period, but there will definitely be additional funding required in the medium to short term to get some of these projects underway and up and running.
Okay. Deputy Chair, Chris Little.
Thanks, Chair. So, Programme for Government 67 is to publish Cohesion Sharing and Integration Strategy, original consultation for which was in 2010. The milestones, however, in the report say that the target date to finalise the strategy and early actions is end of FY 12-13. So I think, in fairness, the strategy was finalised by the end of FY 12-13. I don't think the early actions are finalised a year later. The risk register, risk number 1, is a potential delay in finalising the detail of key actions with probability of 3, and yet, if I'm not wrong, it's delayed by a year already, which, as far as I can see, is another unhelpful inaccuracy. Is there a time scale or an action plan in relation to some of those key actions? I guess we can give you examples to work with. Is there a time scale for the 10 shared education campuses or 10 shared neighbourhoods?
Yes, there are detailed plans and timescales, and they're to be discussed at the ministerial panel. The timescale, the issue about having the 10 shared education campuses fully completed is that they're going through the process at the minute of receiving. They've received 15 applications, and they're going through the process at the minute of assessing those. And then once those have been assessed, they will have a better idea as to what will be required. And each of those shared educational campuses will be a very different type of project. Some of which will be, I mean, if you take the example of Lisnelly is a huge project, given the number of schools that are involved and potentially a number of pupils over time, and also the fact that you're working across a number of different sectors. So there will be, I suppose what I'm trying to say is, first of all, that there are plans, there are detailed plans, and there are milestones for all of them. But again, it reflects the fact that we can't centrally drive all of those plans without actually engaging with the partners who are putting forward their proposals. So that work is being done at the moment.
So why are those timescales not available to this committee or the public?
Well, again, we're happy to provide more information through the process, or to the committee on those timescales and where we are at the moment. But obviously that will need to be agreed by ministers and the ministerial panel. Those plans are subject to agreement by the ministerial panel, but that's I don't think there'll be any problem once they've been agreed by ministers and sharing those. That's
less than clear, but I'll move to some of the issues. The online report actually provides a bit more information than the committee report provided today. The online report refers to a pilot year-round interventions programme to be delivered through Belfast City Council, which will contribute to the delivery of the action for 100 summer schools by the FY 2014-15 target. It's a bit confusing, firstly, to have a year-round interventions programme that contributes to just summer schools, but can you give us any more detail in regards to what that pilot year-round intervention programme is, or maybe that's something you could provide detail to the committee on? That's the first I've heard of it.
Happy to provide detail. I suppose the only thing I would say about that is there was one of the things that we have had a lot of feedback about is even in earlier stages of developing Together Building United Community was this point that if we just wait until the summer, until things heat up, until and maybe problems start to happen, that's not going to really help to solve some of the problems. So although it is, you're right that there's a sort of an apparent contradiction between the idea of having summer schools on one hand, but also having year-round interventions. I suppose the point is it's not just about sending people away for a week and hoping that everything's going to be all right. It's about working year-round, and then so that when people are going on summer camps, it's not the first time they've met. It's about trying to promote better relations all round.
What budget has been allocated to that pilot?
Well, at the minute, we have £400,000 in the baseline, and we're going to be distributing that to Belfast City Council and to DE. And in addition to that, obviously we've put in a bid as part of June monitoring, which again you'll have seen in the papers and the discussion that went up last week.
And what will be the criteria around which projects will be selected for that pilot?
I don't have the detailed criteria in front of me, but I'd be happy to come back to you.
That'd be helpful, thanks. It also mentions a public consultation on legislation to create Equality and Good Relations Commission taking place in March 2014. That's obviously passed. Is there a timescale for that consultation? Yeah, well, the intention is to get that out before the summer. We're into the summer now, so we're hoping that will be in the next month or so. Again, colleagues can maybe update you on that in more detail. The piece of work there, we're doing a lot of work with, as I say, the Equality Commission and CRC, well, particularly the chairs and the chief executives. And one of the things I think we need to be clear about is what is the operating model, how is the Equality and Good Relations Commission going to work in practice. And one of the things we're doing is working through various scenarios with them at the moment as to, well, if there was a particular issue arose or a particular public sector organisation wasn't doing enough to promote good relations, how would that work?
So we're trying to do that alongside the legislation.
Okay.
But yes, I mean, the aim is to get it out in the next.
Okay. One other issue is the Central Good Relations Fund. It's perhaps you could give us a bit of an update, but it's my understanding that the applications for financial year past, funds were only allocated late in the year, like around Christmas time, for the Central Good Relations Fund. Indeed, there seems to be a delay on the allocations of the fund this year as well. So could you speak to that and give us an idea of what total budget we're talking about there in terms of allocation as well?
Well, the closing date for applications to the Central Good Relations Fund in 2014-15 was the 10th of February, and we've had a good deal of interest in that, and obviously ministers are looking at how to prioritise that, and that's given the level of demand, we're just trying to ministers are trying to ensure that the highest priority scheme.
So there's been no allocations for this financial year?
I need to come back. Sorry, I just need to double check.
When were allocations made in financial year 13-14?
Again, I need to come back to you on that in detail.
Okay.
Sorry, I just don't have that.
I mean, this is the Central Good Relations Fund of OFMDFM. It's my understanding that allocations were made in late autumn, if not Christmas, which seems a fiasco.
Well, I suppose the issue is, there's no doubt we would prefer to get applications out, we prefer to get decisions out at the earliest possible stage. The other side of that is obviously we want to make sure that we're getting the best possible, that ministers are able to select the best possible projects to go out, and it's just taken some time to get to the point where we can make decisions. So,
okay. Final comment, Chair. The risk number 3 on the report is the potential that the strategy does not deliver an improvement in good relations. And on a scale of 1 to 5, the probability is 3. Are there real concerns as to regards the potential effectiveness of the strategy?
Well, I suppose the only thing about the strategy is, I mean, there are very, very significant headline actions, very significant actions throughout the strategy. And I think, in fairness, we do need to see what those bring. I mean, the idea of having 10 shared educational campuses, that's a huge commitment. The work that needs to happen to basically remove peace walls with people's agreement, local people's agreement and support, that's a huge exercise. So if those things happen the way that ministers want them to happen, I think there's no doubt about it that that will have a huge effect. I suppose the other side of that, though, is that we have to recognise that there's only so much influence that government can have over some of these issues, that there are wider issues, and I was trying to reflect the balance between, on the one hand, there's a really ambitious programme of work here, but on the other hand, trying to not to be complacent, because there are wider issues that could impact on that work and could impact on the wider position.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, we'll finish with Bronwyn McGann.
Okay. Thanks, Dennis, for your presentation. Would you have any updates on the Moy Regional Moy Primary School in terms of the shared educational campus? Any?
I can check for you. I'm assuming it's one of the 15. It's one of the proposals that's come forward. So we need to have a look at that just and come back to you if that's okay.
That's fine, yeah. I suppose really just to make a general comment as well, in terms of the risk number 3, the recent racist attacks, I believe doesn't actually help that either. And when I was going through some of the indicators to achieve the outcomes, against the 4 areas, I believe as well that the research report over the weekend about mixed marriages actually would potentially jeopardise some of that stuff there too. Just a comment.
I mean, it's absolutely right. These are issues that, first of all, again, it highlights the fact that we're working in a wider context, and also, but I mean, just to reassure the committee that ministers are looking very carefully at how to work to tackle race-hate issues, and then also the wider racial equality issue, and looking very actively at the racial equality strategy.
Okay, thank you. Alex Atwood wanted to come in.
Yeah, just two quick comments and two quick questions. The two questions are, has there been any allocations made for summer intervention projects for this summer? Or is it entirely dependent upon the bid that's gone into monitoring round?
My understanding is there has been some allocations made already, but again, I'll happily come back and confirm that.
And when you're coming back to confirm that, what's the consequences of the bid to monitoring being accepted or not accepted in terms of summer interventions for this summer?
Well, I think...
no, you can come back.
Yeah, we'll come back.
And the second is that you were very forthright in terms of funding for T-Buck. You said that you'd be looking to Peace 4, that you'd be looking to Central Treasury, that you'd be looking to Northern Ireland Central funding, and so on and so forth. It'd be useful to get a paper, I think, about how you think T-Buck is going to be funded, given that it is so dependent on what appears to be so many different sources of funding, which is going back to the Chair's opening question. Then, three, just for the record, we'll be opposing the proposed transfer of functions from the Community Relations Council to the Equality Commission. We've advised that further. But this is my general question. If you go through a lot of the PFG commitments that we've talked about today, Social Investment Fund, the DSC, the Social Protection Fund, the Child Poverty Act, is there a recognition within the department of what the department has put on its own website in terms of the IFS review of child poverty in Northern Ireland, which says that we're not going to achieve the reduction to 10%, but that actually in relative and in absolute terms the figures are going to be 31% and 38% by 2020. Now, given that weaving in and out of all these PFG commitments is the issue of poverty, and there's some in particular in respect to child poverty, is there some strategic thinking, given the PFG commitment on the Child Poverty Act being undertaken, given the scale of what the IFS says and has told OFMDFM is the catastrophic situation that is about to arise in respect to child poverty and arise within 6 years?
I think there's a couple of levels to that. I mean, one of the things is, yes, there definitely is thinking going on for a number of reasons. I mean, we touched on the Delivering Social Change for Children document that went out, and we're listening to the consultation there very carefully and taking on board what people are saying. And definitely, I think we need to look at, and we still have a statutory commitment to publish a child poverty strategy and an update. However, it's clear that a lot of the things we've done, we've moved on a step in terms of, you know, in the past we had a lot of strategies which tended to focus on what departments were doing already. And we've kind of moved to the point of having more additional projects and all of the, and to be fair, in the middle of all of this, when you look at all of these different commitments, I mean, you compare that to the sort of thing that OFMDFM would have been doing in the past. We're spending more money, we're putting, you know, more central funds and more of our own money. We've got more projects than ever before. We're trying various different experiments, if I'm being honest, as ways to try to improve things. But I don't think, and I'm not sure that projects are going to do this. I think there's a bigger issue, and we're looking at that at the moment. And I'm very happy that you raised it because, to be honest, I think we're looking at how can we go to the next stage. How can we think there are things that we can do. I mean, one of the things that we're learning from is the United Youth programme, where we've done a lot of engagement and a lot of co-design work. And there may be scope there to say, if you actually involve, people in the design process. I'm not talking about consultation here, I'm talking about something much more fundamental than that. There seem to be ways to actually move mainstream services to be delivered in a different way. So you're not just adding, you're not just putting out projects or signature projects, you're actually in the process of saying, well, how do we influence the £10 billion of spend that comes into Northern Ireland? And I think that's the sort of thinking we're doing at the minute, but we would be very open to the committee giving us thoughts on this. There's a bigger question about how we actually move to the next stage and take the whole child poverty agenda to the next stage.
An updated child poverty plan might be one.
Yeah,
That's a commitment you have, and it's not been done yet.
No, and I take the criticism on board, but I think that in fairness, part of that has been part of the consultation process has been to highlight. We thought actually one of the reasons it's been delayed has been because we actually went through the consultation process was too short anyway. So, but beyond that, so therefore the consultation process was extended. But over and above that, we tried to do things more strategically. We thought, well, let's bring the child poverty strategy together with the children's strategy. And I have to say, the response to that, people do want more integrated, joined-up government, but they also don't want to lose things. So they didn't want to lose. They felt that the children's strategy was being lost in this, and that. So we do need to. I just think we need to find a way to take this to the next level, above and above. I think strategies will do a lot, but I think it's maybe some way of working that we start to influence behaviours on the ground. And I'm talking about departments. I'm talking about arm's length bodies that work for them.
Thank you. Members, I just remind you we have 3 more substantive items to get through. Now, I don't want to censor anybody, and Alec Maskey indicated.
Just briefly, Chair, I mean, it's just obviously given all the recent kind of controversy, where do you actually see the racial equality strategy dovetailing with T-Buck?
Well, I think the two have to work closely in harmony. It has to be. I mean, racial equality is part of T-Buck, and the two need to work together. We need to get the racial equality strategy agreed and out. That's basically what needs to happen.
But just to follow on that, I mean, presupposing we'll get that at some point, what's the kind of pecking order or the relationship between, evolving the T-Buck and the racial equality strategy? I'm trying to work out how it actually you could see it. I mean, I take your point entirely. I just think that we do need strategies, but at the end of the day, it's action on the ground. It's changing people's behaviour, because we can talk to the cows come home about getting people not to be sectarian or not to be racist. We'll take another 50 years before we change a lot of people's mindsets, but we can change their behaviour. That's for sure. In the American civil rights movement experiences tells us that anywhere in the world you will not convince people not to be sectarian or racist or be colonial or empirist. You'll stop what they're doing and you'll change their behaviour. So I'm just trying to work out in my own mind how they will set their own dovetail, time frame or sequencing. Obviously there will be, assuming that the strategy is published and agreed, then there will be a time scale for action which will need to run alongside the various projects that I'd outlined earlier on, coming out of the T-Buck. So we need to just make sure that the two of them are given equal status. I think the other thing is, and this again goes back to the earlier point, we need to start. Part of the problem is we need to have strategies and we need to give things labels in order to make sure that that we're taking forward these different initiatives and there's clarity about what we're trying to do. But the other side of that is we also have to recognise that, and I say we in the department need to be able to recognise that where things need to join up. So, for example, the United Youth programme. I mean, United Youth came out under T-Buck, but actually United Youth is going to, if it's going to work, it's going to work by helping young people to develop their own competencies and confidence, even in terms of their own life and their own relationships around them. And then, this was the message came back to us through the co-design process, and then it's a case of working out relationships with families and local community, and then across the divide. It wasn't going to be a case of, or various divides, it wasn't going to be a case of just saying, let's put together a programme, we'll send people away on a bit of training, we'll give them a bit of volunteering work, and so on. So I think The point I'm making is that will need, so there will be a racial equality dimension to that, for example. So we need to make sure all of these different programmes reflect the fact that we have an increasingly diverse society, and that we have issues and problems that have arisen in our, through race, hate and other issues that we need to tackle through those programmes. So,
okay. But I think we need to leave it there, Dennis. Just to sum up, in terms of where you're coming back to us, number one, guidance in respect of Bright Start. Number two, clarification on the spending profile of the 12 million for childcare. Thirdly, the budget profile for the TBUC commitments and the sources of the funding.
Could I, sorry, Chair, just on that one, just I didn't get a chance to say, that would obviously be subject to ministers agreeing the profile and the budgets. That's the only thing I would say on that. So, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry,
Oh,
Chair.
yeah, no, okay. Okay, clarification is noted. Implementation plans for the same. The fifth was criteria for the pilot youth intervention programmes. And the consequences should June monitoring not be successful in the bids thereof. Then timing of the allocations of the Central Good Relations Fund in 13-14 and 14-15. And finally, more info on the Moy Educational Campus.
Okay.
Okay. Grania, Henry and Dennis.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Members, next is a briefing again by departmental officials, this time on a summary of responses to the consultation on the draft Good Relations Indicators. This consultation ran from late January to the end of March. The committee considered a written briefing at its meeting in mid-May, following which members requested this oral briefing. The clerk's brief is in your pack at page 38. On page 40 are papers provided by the department, including a copy of its summary report. That's page 42, and a copy of the consultation document is at page 80. Also included on page 72 is a copy of the Community Relations Council response to the consultation. So we welcome Pauline Donnan and Fergus Devitt for opening comment.
Thank you, Chair. And in light of the presentation you've had earlier, I'll keep this as short as possible, and then happy to take any questions. Happy to be here today, obviously, following on from the written submission that you have received, and Pauline, who's one of the principal statisticians in the department, is with me today. You're aware that the Together Building United Community Strategy sets out a range of actions and commitments under 4 key strategic priorities, which are our children and young people, our shared community, our safe community and our cultural expression. And there was a commitment within the strategy to review the existing set of good relations indicators. The revised set of indicators will be used to inform and help measure progress against each of those 4 key priorities. The original good relations indicators were developed to monitor progress under a shared future and the racial equality strategy. The baseline report was published in 2007 and updates have been published annually since then. The latest update was published in January 2013. The next report will be published following agreement on the revised indicator set. In regards to the consultation process, the review of the indicators began last year following publication of the strategy. And with the assistance of an advisory group comprising representatives from a wide range of organisations, a draft set of indicators was agreed by that advisory group and were then consulted on more widely between the 22nd of January and the 31st of March. Consultees were invited to provide any comments via an online survey on our website. Key stakeholders were identified and invited to respond to the consultation document, and in addition, members of the advisory group were asked to forward the consultation document to other agencies and were encouraged to promote awareness of the consultation. Responses were received either using the online form or through hard copy responses, and organisations were free to comment on all or only some of the indicators. In total, there were 54 respondents to the consultation. Of these, 45 completed the online survey and 9 submitted a written response. And 28 organisations participated in the consultation. Respondents were asked if they considered each of the indicators to be suitable. Feedback on each of the 21 indicators was very positive, with at least 2/3 of respondents agreeing each of the indicators chosen were suitable. For 10 of the indicators, at least 90% of respondents indicated that they were suitable. Respondents were also given the opportunity to provide more detailed comments about the indicators, and these comments will be considered when finalising the set of indicators. We're grateful to the Committee for its interest in the implementation of the overall strategy, including the development of the Good Relations indicators, and we look forward to receiving the Committee's responses or any additional comments you might have on the draft indicators in your role as a super consultee. Grateful again, Chair, for the opportunity to be here today, and Pauline and I are happy to take and try to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, Fergus, thank you very much indeed. Key stakeholders were identified, and you had 54 respondents, including 28 participating organisations. Any gaps that you identified where you didn't get a response?
We think, Chair, through using the advisory group and using them then as a network to get the consultation document out to their own networks and groups of stakeholders, we believe that that was quite a wide consultation. Clearly, it's difficult to predict how many consultation responses would be expected, but we believe that we have covered as many of the key stakeholders as possible. And in fact, we extended the consultation slightly to allow some others to contribute.
So from what you're saying, you know, if there's a kind of landscape out there, there's no kind of dark area where you feel you haven't got the response?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. You say very positive, two-thirds of people were positive across all the indicators.
Yes.
Just again, sounds very positive. Did they have the opportunity to identify what they thought were indicators which should be and which aren't in?
Yes, they were given that opportunity. In the online survey, there was space for consultees to actually suggest alternative indicators or to comment on the existing indicators. So yes, we have some suggestions for additional indicators.
What would those be? Can you tell us?
Some of them relate to indicators that were in the last set of good relations indicators that people felt were important to include in this as well. Our goal was really to try and reduce the number of indicators in this new set, because we had found through experience that actually trying to present those indicators and to get a clear idea of what the picture of good relations indicators in Northern Ireland was very, very difficult. With it was 100 indicators we had or something like that. So what we were trying to do through this whole review was almost come up with what are the key indicators that really will cover all bases.
Right, okay. I'm just trying to think back, Pauline. I think the last programme for government, when you drilled down, had over 300 measures and was deemed to be overly complicated. And then you become fixated with ticking boxes rather than taking the bigger picture. So is it the same sort of thing you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the whole purpose behind the indicators really, well, it's twofold. One is to paint a picture of good relations here, and also to monitor the success of the Together Building United Community strategy. So in a sense, the indicators are at a strategic level, and they will be supplemented with research that we're commissioning or that other academics are doing, in addition to evaluations of programmes and projects on the ground.
Are they too focused on the two traditional communities, do you think?
That's certainly something I think came through the consultation, that people sense that a lot of the indicators are focused on those two traditional communities. I mean, clearly there's going to be a set of indicators developed to go alongside the racial equality strategy, for example, and there are some indicators within what we are proposing as well around race and hate crime and other things like that, but it's certainly an issue that has come up.
Yeah.
So there'll be a separate set of indicators for the racial equality strategy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that a ministerial decision?
It was something actually that has been guided by the advisory panel working on the development of the racial equality strategy. They believe that there needed to be a separate set of indicators.
Yeah, that the full extent of outcomes that the racial equality strategy would be achieving couldn't be encompassed within one set of good relations indicators. It was trying to do everything. So we were really guided by stakeholders, if you like, as to what their preference would be, and certainly we have come up with a draft set of indicators that I understand the committee will be receiving today or tomorrow, which I think really cover a lot more detail, not only race relations and good relations in that sense, but also racial equality itself.
And you talk about the racial equality strategy as if there was one.
Well, I think, as Dennis was saying earlier, clearly it's a priority for the department to get that published as soon as possible.
Do you have a date, Fergus? Because I know a minister told the House last week, I think, that it was certainly signed off by one side of the department, and I think there was an expectation that we were now into days rather than weeks.
Well, certainly it's not directly my area of policy responsibility, the Minister, but certainly my understanding is that there is very active work going on to get that finalised and published. And as Pauline has said, our understanding is that the set of racial equality indicators has been sent to the committee possibly today.
Can I just ask a brief supplementary, Chair? I presume that doesn't mean that indicators relating to race need to be prohibited from the good relations indicators, though?
Absolutely not. And there are a couple in there to do with how favourable people feel towards minority ethnic communities, and what they think about how they contribute to the diversity of our society, including, and as well as that, hate crime figures as well.
Thanks.
Oh, walk away, Chris.
That's all. Thanks. Thank you.
Oh, is that it?
Yep.
Right.
Oh, that's just me supplementing that question.
No,
Yeah, you're up. Amy. All right, fair enough. Thanks for your presentation, folks. I found the consultation summary document very helpful indeed, so thank you, on a note of recognising good papers from the department. Outcome 1.2 is in relation to young people engaging in bringing the community together, and the key question is percentage of young people who have regular contact with young people from other communities, and the source is to be the Young Life and Times survey. 91% of people think the indicator is suitable, but a number of people had qualifying comments to raise in relation to that. I have one myself, and I'm not sure if there's a way around it or not, but the phrase other communities seems to be in a degree of contrast to the overarching vision of building a united community, so maybe that's something to have a look at. Other comments in response to that particular indicator were that in relation to integrated education, people made clear it is important that integrated education is included as a measurement within this outcome. It is a critical partner in bringing children together and influencing change. And a question was proposed of percentage of young people who would choose to or are currently accessing integrated education would be a more deeper and meaningful measure. At this stage, can you comment in relation to particular suggestions as to whether or not you expect those to be included in the finalised draft or the finalised indicators?
Well, clearly what we're doing today, Chris, is engaging with the committee and its role as a super consultee, so I'm not sure it'd be right for us to conclude our thinking before we actually get the committee's response as well, to help us shape our final thinking around that. I mean, clearly the purpose of a consultation is to help to shape the final outcome and the final product, so we will certainly be looking at every response that we have got, and ultimately ministers will conclude as to what the set of indicators should be.
Well, for your benefit and perhaps for Clark's, if we are responding in the manner that you've suggested, I think that's a helpful suggestion, a helpful response to that particular question. There's also a request for a clarification as to what regular contact is. Is there a consideration of making a definition or making that more specific in order to help people respond to that particular question?
Yeah, absolutely. And regular contact really refers to how often young people will socialise or play sport with people from a different religious community, and so we're going to categorise that into very often, sometimes, rarely, never, don't know, and that is really replicating the existing Young Life and Times question that was asked in 2012. So,
and do you need to engage with the survey in order to have that included in the survey then, or?
Yeah, we're already involved in engagement in relation to the Young Life and Times and the Northern Ireland Life and Times.
Okay.
So
one other question then was the percentage of young people who have done projects with pupils from other schools, had classes with pupils from other schools, used or shared sports facilities or equipment. Of those who have done projects, shared classes, facilities, etc., what percentage who think sharing is a good idea? Again, there was a number of responses that suggested this needs to consider the percentage of young people currently in integrated education, or the percentage of young people who have been turned away from integrated schools due to limited capacity, on the premise that integrated education is a clear good relations indicator. People have expressed concern about the removal of reference to integrated education. So that was in the previous indicators then, yeah. And someone else says it's vital to retain reference to integrated education in the revised draft indicators to monitor the executive statutory duty to promote integrated education. I'd support those submissions then. Another point is made that there needs to be a clearer definition of shared space. One of the questions is percentage of those who have children at school who think that their child's school is a shared space. Is there any thought around providing a degree of definition to assist respondents?
Well, a shared space as defined within the surveys, interviewees are prompted, and what they're told is a shared space is defined as a place where you feel you can be open about your own cultural identity.
Okay, and that, I'll use that question to lead into another concern that was expressed around the fact that the questions seem reasonably attitudinal as opposed to measuring actual behaviour or behavioural change. So, for example, it could be one thing for people to think their area is shared, and another thing to measure whether people actually use services in a shared manner, for example, in housing. Is there any thought given as to how to actually drill down into more specific data in relation to behaviour as opposed to just attitudinal?
Yeah, I mean, some of the indicators use some of the housing executive data and PSNI data, and well, the census as well. But certainly, it's something that we are very keen to explore. And I mean, one of the things that will flow out of the Good Relations Indicator framework at a strategic level will be the development of monitoring frameworks at district council level. So I would envisage that's where you'll start to see some of the behaviours and the impacts on the ground coming out.
So I suppose, for example, in some of the suggestions are that for housing, it could be percentage number of people living in single identity area or non-single identity area. Is that data that you will be able to access?
Well, potentially we could access it, yes. I mean, we do include an indicator from the Census of Population 2011, which looks at segregated areas and the number of segregated areas in Northern Ireland. So, I mean, looking at specific housing areas would be in addition to that. Okay. So again, that's a possibility.
Okay, and at the moment there are no indicators in relation to interface barriers? No?
No, there's nothing about interface barriers, but we had commissioned some research, the Attitudes to Peace Wall survey and research, and it looked at the general public's opinion about interfaces and also people living in areas close to interfaces. And certainly from that, it showed that certainly residents living in those areas, there was a lot of work to do before interfaces would actually come down. So we're aware that there's a commitment in PFG for DOJ to reduce the number of interface structures. So there is an indicator within PFG in relation to that, but we haven't included it specifically in this set of good relations indicators.
Is it something you'd consider including inside the report so that it's put forward in a more joined up manner?
Well, clearly, you know, from a strategic point of view, there is the commitment within the United Community Strategy and, as Pauline has said, through the DOJ Programme for Government commitment to remove and reduce the number of interface barriers. And we are doing a lot of work with our colleagues in a variety of organisations, really on a two-stage approach around interfaces. The first one is creating the conditions to allow interfaces to be adjusted or removed, and then actually physically doing that work. And it's the first part of that, which is really the key work and has to be done quietly and sometimes under the radar. So we'll certainly consider that, because the work around interfaces is essential, we believe. And in a number of other areas as well that are set out in the strategy.
Sure, unless you have indicators in relation to those thoughts, you don't know what stage you're at in terms of removal then?
Yeah, and I suppose the question might be, is it include broadly within this set of indicators, or is it done at a more local level where the interfaces actually are?
Okay. Final question, Chair. You have the peace monitoring report.
Yeah.
It says extremely detailed report with extensive data. How will that factor into any good relations indicator reporting?
Well, obviously the peace monitoring report has been through 3 years now, I think, and we're not quite clear whether the funding for that is going to continue, because it was funded by Joseph Rowntree through the Community Relations Council. I mean, clearly it is one set of indicators, but it looks at broader issues rather than just good relations. It looks at economic conditions, for example, and others. Clearly there's a lot of other research reports, statistical reports and evidence out there, and we would want to build an overall picture of what is contributing to good relations in our society and use that to help us build as comprehensive a picture as possible.
Okay. Do you see this, is this monitoring the outcomes of TBUC, or will there be a more detailed outcome-based approach to TBUC, the good relations strategy?
Well, without sounding like a typical civil servant, it's a bit of both, I think. I mean, obviously within TBUC there's the headline actions, and they are going to be monitored separately. For example, the 10 shared neighbourhoods, 10 shared campuses, 10,000 people in United Youth, they'll be measured separately in terms of how they're taken forward. I think this is more at a strategic level to see how attitudes and behaviours are changing and improving across our society over a period of time.
I think that's helpful clarification. Okay, thanks, Chair. Thanks.
McGann.
Thank you. I'm conscious right out of the 54 respondents, there was one rural organisation that responded to this, and that's the Rural Community Network. And obviously they have raised concerns, around the document, and I would like to know, in terms of indicators for rural areas, will that be addressed and given equal weight? Because we don't have too many organisations in rural areas in the first case. So,
sure. I mean, if I can say, first of all, at a very strategic level, we're clear that the Together Building a United Community strategy is across the whole of our society. It's not just an urban issue, it's a rural issue as well. And we have done some work ourselves within the department with RCN and other stakeholders. And in fact, myself and some of my colleagues are at a conference next week called Beyond Belfast down in Cookstown, where we are actually taking a range of stakeholders through the strategy. So we're very aware of the rural dimension to this. As we said earlier, there's also going to be work done at district council level to develop a set of indicators which are going to be specific to those areas, and they're obviously going to capture specific local issues. So through that mechanism, we believe that we will capture a range of attitudes and behaviours both in rural and urban areas. So it's something we're very conscious of.
Yeah, can I just add to that as well? Using the Northern Ireland Life and Times data or the Young Life and Times data, we're able to look at responses from people who are living in urban areas or in rural areas. So we'll be able to compare the different attitudes that those two sets of people might have, if any.
okay.
Alex Maskey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Bernal and Polly, for your presentation so far. I'm just trying to work out in my own mind in terms of trying to devise the indicators, because it is a very important task, obviously, and like everything else, nothing's ever really perfect, but I just think it's always important to try to get as drilled down as much as we can do, and then get a qualitative set of indicators, because I think somebody said early on, or you ask two people a question, you might get an entirely different answer because of a different understanding of what the question is. Like people talk about a shared space. Well, I know some people who think about a shared space as where you'll be neutral, because you won't defend somebody else because you're trying to share that space. So, if Belfast City Council wants to organise something for St Patrick's Day down in Custom House Square, it's a shared space, and you can't have any national flags or emblems because it's not permissible, because it's a shared space. Other people view a shared space as they can do what the hell they like in it. So, because it's the main road, or it's an arterial road, or it's a Queen's Highway, call it whatever you want. So, there's two different perceptions of what shared space actually is. So, I just think that we have to, when we're doing these indicators, we have to indicate, you know what I mean? What is your interpretation of a shared space? Is it where you can do what you like, or where you will actually respect and somebody else has a different view from me, so therefore I will neutralise mine, or embrace both, or multi, which I would actually prefer eventually that we can get to. So for me, it's about trying to get qualitative indicators or put some weight on them. I think Bronwyn's making the point there about rural and all the rest of that. So I'm not suggesting we go down the route as where we did years ago in terms of EU funding, that we actually ended up doing the thing, drilling down as far as enumeration districts to get data. I'm not suggesting we do that in terms of good relations, but I just do think we'll have to drill down further, because otherwise we're fooling ourselves. We're not actually putting a reality check as an overarching kind of guide to how we actually do this, because otherwise if we get off to a false start, we're not actually going to tackle the problems as they really are. You know anything about quality?
Well, I suppose just, I mean, to go back to shared space, when it's asked in the surveys, the interviewer will actually qualify what that means. So I suppose every respondent has the same ideas as what shared space means, which is a place where you feel you can be open about your own cultural identity. But as you say, I suppose people could interpret that potentially in different ways. But in terms of qualitative, I think with the Good Relations Council, the District Council Good Relations programme, there will be an opportunity to look at more qualitative research in support of their evaluation and monitoring of what the funding is being spent on in their local area. So that's where I would see a bit more meat being added to the bones here.
But as it is at the moment, and the reason I mentioned the enumeration districts in terms of like census, in terms of we take different areas. And I've had engagement with the PSNI in recent times when they're saying, but that area is a mixed area, that area is such and such, and then I'm saying, well, actually, it's not. Go to your census figures. I shouldn't have to tell you, but go to the census figures. In fact, there they are. And that tells you that because areas change. We all know that. That's an ongoing process over many, many years. So, but nobody's ever actually saying, oh, hold on a second, there's a wee flag and which tells me if I'm a statutory body like a council or a police service or a department of government, at what point do I get a trigger which tells me, oh, hold on a second, now you have to start thinking differently about that area, if you know what I mean. So I just think we have to have these things in there which are the reality checks, if you know what I mean. And I think you can only do it there by doing some more qualitative work. See, I can say it's very good to have integrated education. It doesn't mean to say every child going in an integrated school is going to be a better person or a more integrated person. Far from it. So we've seen information over the years where that doesn't actually necessarily work out that way, sad as that may be. But that's just because you go to a particular school doesn't mean you're going to live your life monoculturally. It doesn't mean to say you're going to be a much more integrated person either. So if you know the point I'm making, I'm not trying to create obstacles, I'm just trying to start off with a real solid foundation of information.
Okay.
The last point I wanted just to make here, Chair, was just in terms of the young people. Do you have any sense from the engagement from young people, because obviously there's some good information there, again, like it to be qualitatively drilled down into, but some people throw away like remarks like young people don't care anymore. I don't accept that. I think most young people that I know care. They may express it in different ways, they may have a different view, they may have a different priority today, as maybe a 40-year-old may have. But my view is that they still care about matters around them. Politics in a small p, call it whatever you want. So, do you have any sense of where young people are generally at in terms of the responses you've got, albeit maybe limited?
I mean, Pauline can maybe give a statistical perspective on that. I mean, I can maybe give a strategic one, which is around the work we did on the United Youth Programme and the co-design. And certainly the young people that we engaged with were hugely enthusiastic and contributed enormously to the stage that we have got that programme to. So I didn't see any negativity, certainly in the people that we engaged with, in terms of how they wanted to create a society for the future that they wanted to live in.
Thank you for that.
I mean, there are some indications. We had commissioned research looking at community relations over the last 20 years, and the researchers looked at various different groups, and actually young people, I hate to say this, but they did tend to have more negative attitudes than older people. But I mean, we do find
say negative, Pauline. How do you define that?
Just in terms of their optimism about the future, in terms of the community relations and how they saw relationships between Catholics and Protestants. I mean, I can send on that research.
And still care about them, what I'm making.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot more information in the Young Life and Times survey in the whole community relations module, so I'm happy to share that with the committee, that would be useful.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think we need to move on, members. We're content with Pauline and Fergus. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, we still have two on the agenda, but the next one should be brief, and it's really getting a nod there from our contributor. We have our committee motion up for debate on Monday on Refugee Week and Community Relations Week. We're going to get some thoughts now on foot of a research paper that Michael Potter has put together for us. Page 93 of your pack is a copy of that research paper, and in your table papers at 41, a number of briefing papers that voluntary and community sector organisations have released on refugee issues. Michael, you're very patient, first of all, thank you. And I think you're time limited to 5 minutes.
I'm indeed, Chair, yes. Yes, okay. Thank you very much. Just to recap, the committee asked for a general overview on refugees and asylum seekers in Northern Ireland. So just to start with some brief definitions, a refugee is someone who's unable or unwilling to return to a country of origin due to a well-founded fear of persecution. An asylum seeker is someone who claims to be a refugee but whose case has not been definitively evaluated. It's just to clarify those 2 points of definition. Immigration and asylum are accepted matters, the Immigration Office in Belfast and the short-term detention facility in Larne being the responsibility of the Home Office. But aspects of the asylum system intersect with devolved matters, such as in healthcare, education for children of asylum seekers, and the care of unaccompanied children. Once confirmed as such, refugees have the same rights and privileges as other residents in Northern Ireland, although the very nature of the need to seek asylum, they can have quite complex needs. So I'm conscious of the need to be brief, so I'll maybe skip to some key questions that have been raised specifically in Northern Ireland in relation to the asylum system, and there's much more detail in the paper itself. In a general sense, it would probably be useful to have open the Appendix 2 of the paper, which summarises the asylum system in the UK. That's on page 18 of the research paper, which I think is page 112 on your electronic packs. There's just a flow chart that gives an idea of how it all happens. So skipping to some key questions around that have been raised by various organisations and processes in Northern Ireland. First of all, statistics. The Home Office does not routinely publish statistics on asylum seekers and refugees by region. It might be helpful if this were done for planning purposes, but also to dispel myths about numbers. A disproportionately low number of asylum applications are received in Northern Ireland compared to the rest of the UK. There are no official figures published for refugees in Northern Ireland. There was an FOI by the BBC that got some figures, general figures, rounded figures if you like, of asylum seekers in Northern Ireland, and that was 240 applications in 2012, of which 80 were successful. So they're across the UK they're quite low. The asylum process in Northern Ireland. Initial contact with a relevant official to claim asylum can be delayed due to the absence of such individuals at many points of entry to Northern Ireland. This can have an impact of how the application is viewed by immigration officials. Also, there's a question as to whether there's sufficient specialist expertise in Northern Ireland to identify victims of torture, trafficking, or a condition prohibiting detention, such as trauma, which many refugees may have. And thirdly, the swift removal of individuals to Britain away from support bases in Northern Ireland in cases of detention has been raised as a concern. Consistency of health provision to bridge periods when applicants have been turned down or are appealing or cannot return to their country of origin because it's unsafe. And there was a presentation by a number of organisations to the Health Committee in December 2013 on that subject. Support for destitute asylum seekers who have been turned down but cannot return home, as asylum seekers don't have a right to undertake paid work. And then the question around ensuring the safety of unaccompanied children in the care of social services. There's some figures in the paper. A number have disappeared from care in the last few years. There's concerns around trafficking there. Oversight of national detention facilities in Northern Ireland, such as Larne House, considering justice here is devolved. ensuring victims of trafficking and those vulnerable to trafficking are identified by the authorities in the asylum system. And finally, the integration of refugees in Northern Ireland in the absence of a refugee integration strategy. Most other regions of the UK do have refugee integration strategies. We don't. So that's a brief overview of the key concerns that have been raised through the research.
Michael, thank you very much indeed. Now, I will open it if members want, but we do have another session.
Just very briefly, Chair, thank you for your information so far. It's a very good paper. Just in terms of the last point you made there, that we really don't have an integration strategy, do you have any sort of further information as to how that actually manifests itself? I mean, I know in my own constituency there'll be quite a significant number of asylum seekers and refugees, and I know that kind of almost the hand-to-mouth existence of a lot of people exist under. There's some good support there as well, but have you any other information as to how that does manifest itself and what other kind of support mechanisms would have evolved, even informally within the community there?
Yeah, I've not looked at it in great detail, but there are a number of support organisations around Northern Ireland that have been working with refugees, and they would report things like, well, certainly concerns around getting work, concerns around that they're getting the appropriate health care, again, trauma being related to a lot of refugee populations. Yep. So they basically have complex issues that we need to grasp in terms of a region.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Well, if we're all content, Michael, thank you very much. That's going to be a very useful contribution for us in the head of Monday's debate. So thank you very much. Members, you'll be aware on our committee website, the committee office staff have put a section on background papers. First of all, I think if you're content, we should add the research paper.
Yep.
And secondly, the paper makes reference to other government involved government departments, health, education, employment and learning, justice, who all have a role to play. So are we content that we forward all that information to those committees ahead of Monday's debate, because they may find that useful? So just before we go into closed session on NIPSO draft work, forward work programme on page 122, Deputy Chair and I are participating in the World United football match next Wednesday lunchtime.
Bill?
Apparently.
Don't I?
No, I'm making a comeback after 47 years.
Remember, you're not Brazil, you're Northern Ireland.
Would members be content if the meeting starts at 2:15 to give Chris time to get here and me time to check in to A&E?
It'll be a long wait.
As long a wait as the comeback's been, yeah. Is that okay to go for 2:15 next week? Thank you. Any other business? If not, can we then move into a closed session, please?